Waiting too long to harvest is probably one of the biggest issues that people have when they first start up vermicomposting. They tend to throw everything into the bin, and then they want to wait and wait and wait until absolutely everything is decomposed and processed. And the problem with doing that is that the worms will start reworking those castings, and they'll become finer and finer and finer. And eventually they're going to turn into kind of what I have here today that I'm going to show you. It's a really, really fine, it's almost like silt, muddy silt. You can compact it into a nice little hard rubber ball almost. It's almost impossible to dry out because it absorbs so much moisture. And I don't care what kind of system you have, even if you have, you know, the most breathable VermiBag there is, if you let the system get like that, no air is going to pass through that dense material because it gets so dense because it's so fine. It's not possible for the air to get through there and dry the material out. So you need to really get on a schedule and harvest about once a month, even if it's just a couple gallons or a gallon out of your system and stuff, just to keep the system cycling and keep that bottom section from turning into a really fine silt. Now this system's been probably 5 months since I last harvested on it, and I've really been neglecting it, just throwing a lot of wet material in it. And I did notice that I had leachate dripping out of the bottoms here. So, you know, I opened it up and it was a mess. So I opened up the bottoms and just let it air out just so I could get airflow through it for a week, just to at least dry it out a tiny little bit. And then I pulled a little bit of material out, what I'll show you here in a second. But it's best to harvest your castings probably on a monthly basis. And when you harvest them, I mean, they don't have to be completely worked over. You might see little scraps here and there, and that's fine. You don't even have to sift it. If you sift it, that material is going to go out in the sifter and you'll throw it back into the machine. But you can throw that material out into your garden. It's not going to hurt anything at all. And having sifted castings is just kind of nice. I guess it's nice to have, but you don't have to. You can throw this material exactly the way it is coming out of here with all the little bits and pieces and imperfections and pieces of wood and stuff. You know, throw that directly into your garden. It's fine. Finished sifted castings are just a nice looking product. I mean, if you're going to sell them, of course you have to, but if you're doing this for your own personal use, I don't even bother sifting castings anymore for myself. I mean, I take them directly out the bottom, I take them out into the garden. It takes way too much time for what I gain, because I really gain nothing. So let me pull you in, we'll take a look at these castings, I'll show you how wet they were and how fine the material is. So this is some of the material that I already pulled out of the bag. And you can see when I squeeze it like that, I mean, it's just super fine. It's almost like silt. And this is super dense. And this is a perfect example of castings that are just way, way over processed. I mean, I could squeeze water out of this too easily if I wanted to, but when I just work it like this here, it turns basically into a mud ball. And if you leave your castings in your bag for too long, that's exactly what's going to happen. It's going to turn into this real, real fine, silty material, and it's going to hold a tremendous amount of water, and the bag's never going to dry out. So let's go ahead and reach inside here. I'm going to pull out a little bit more material out of this bag. So first thing, unzip this. And on the on the little Mammoth, you can actually, you know, just open up half the system at a time if you want. And again, what's nice on the little Mammoth is, I mean, I'm sitting on a small chair here. I mean, this is a little kid's chair, but you can sit on a 5-gallon bucket if you want. But I'm not down on my knees. I mean, that's a big deal that I don't have to get down on my knees. And having this on the rollers is super nice too, on the wood stand, because I can just move it however I want to position it. If I needed to get another section of the bag here, I can just twist it here and go like this. So, and actually this is a good position right here to go ahead and try and harvest some of this. So I'm going to go ahead and just reach up in this half, this side. And again, this is really, real fine material. So I'm going to pull out quite a bit. Little pieces of plastic. Normally I go up to about here, you know, just up above the zipper on this, but this particular bag I'm going to go a little bit further because I want to get some of this material out of here. And there's a lot of worms down in this lower section now too, because again, once you let it get that fine, the worms tend to disperse themselves everywhere in the bag for some reason. I'm not really sure why, but if you have very, very fine material, you tend to have a lot of worms in it. So, and part of it is because it never dries out either. If this bag was proper and was just ready for a harvest, this bottom section would not be that wet. It'd be a little bit drier. And the worms don't actually like that drier environment, so they tend to hang out at the top where it's a little bit more moisture. So then I'm getting to a point where it's a little bit drier. Again, I'm having trouble reaching this side over here, so I'm just going to go ahead and rotate the bag around so I can get at that section right there. Okay, now part of the system just collapsed on the top, so I must have had the top collapse a little bit. So I'm not going to go any further at this point. I'm going to leave that there and go ahead and take the harvest panel, zip it up, and I'm going to go ahead and switch to the other side. And again, what's really nice on the Mammoth, the little Mammoth, is you can have this extra support right here in the middle that these mortar trays fit in. And it's sweet because I can just put 2 mortar trays here, and I can actually have additional mortar trays down on the bottom. So just pretty neat feature. Gives you a lot of extra storage. And the way it is right now, everything falls into these mortar trays, so I don't have to worry about making a big mess. And get the zipper again, I have it on the rollers is wonderful. So I can reach over to the back side there, grab the zipper, and pull it up. And I'll go ahead and open it up. Come in here. And again, I don't know how well you can see that, but it's really fine. Silt is kind of the best comparison I can make to it, really. It's like a fine silt. Now I'm going to have to put some bait trays in here. I made up some more bedding today, so I will put some new fresh bedding in here and some bait, and I'll bait some of these worms out. I'm going to start a couple of these systems up fresh. The 2 maxes that I currently have are kind of in rough shape. So I'm going to go ahead and basically empty them completely out, take the castings and store them for spring. And then I will start the systems up from scratch with the worms that I do out of the baiting out of these castings. A lot of worms, a lot of worms. I mean, you know, and the more I vermicompost too, you know, worms don't necessarily bother me too much in my castings. You know, a few amount of worms. As many as there are here, yeah. But they're pretty easy to bait out. There. That's as far as I'm gonna go with that one too. Don't grab your bag when your hands are like this either, or you'll make some really nice nasty marks on it. I normally have a bucket of water here if I can wash my hands off before I grab the bag. But so that's it. I'm gonna take these castings and I'll set them up here on top, actually right here, and we'll take a look at them and you know, see what they look like, see how many worms are in them. Okay, so overall, I mean, the material still looks pretty good, but it really is really finely worked over, and again, like a silt. A lot of seeds in here. You can tell I put a lot of melons and stuff in it, and that probably contributed to it a little bit, is because I had so many melons in here that it was a ton of moisture. And all this material here, this cardboard sacks or gunny sacks that I have, I'm going to go ahead and just throw back into the system. But again, you can see the worms. A lot of worms, but they're all small worms. I really don't have hardly any large worms anymore in a couple of these systems. They've been neglected so long that the worms tend to get more in number, but they get smaller. These lower sections that came out first, again, this is really, really fine material. So I'm going to go ahead and dump this other one back in here for have everything into one. Okay, now what I'm going to do is go ahead and open up two areas, and I'm going to put two bait trays in here. I'll put one right here and then one over here, kind of on both sides. And again, baiting is very successful normally when you have castings or something that, you know, are well worked over, because there's not an awful lot of food. There is some food in here, but not much. So when you put in a bait tray, when there's hardly any food, the worms will go to that bait tray pretty fast. So I think you'll be surprised here. We'll look at this next week. And the other thing I always do on these bait trays, is when I put them in here, is to try and keep the bait trays pretty wet. This material here is really wet already, but worms like moist areas and stuff, so don't make the bait tray really dry. Go ahead and make it possibly a little bit wetter than this material, at least keep it the same. That'll tend to draw them in a little bit more. And we'll put some really good stuff in there. Like I said, I just made up some new fresh bedding, so we'll put some new fresh bedding in this. I'll put in some ground up birdseed, and then probably some fruit and mix it in there. And we'll cover it up and let it sit for a week. So let me get the bait trays. Okay, so I got a lot of good stuff in here. I got a bunch of old banana peels and some peaches, or pear skins, excuse me, and some onions were a little rotten, and a little bit of squash. So a lot of stuff. And again, this is just that fresh bedding, and then I went ahead and threw in some crushed up birdseed. It's kind of like worm chow for the most part, and mix that all in with this completely. And then I added all the vegetables and fruit and stuff that I had in there for scraps. And again, I put these down, push the dirt up against them, make sure they're down nice and firm on the bottom. And then I throw just a little bit of this material over the top here for the worms can easily go in there. Do the same thing on the other side here. I put these almost all the way down to the bottom. Again, make sure the material goes up along the edges and stuff for those worms to have a direct path in there. And that's it. We'll let this thing sit for a week and take a peek at that and see if I can separate some of these out. We'll see how many worms we get. So that's it, folks. Quick harvest on the little mammoth. Dealing with castings that have sat in the systems too long. They become real silty and stuff. That's exactly what happened here. Dealing with worms in your castings when you harvest them. We had a tremendous amount of worms in these castings. And how to set up these bait trays. So we got the bait trays in here. We'll give it a week, and I think you'll be impressed on how many worms we pull out of the castings, you know, in a week. So, you know, if you get a lot of worms in your castings when you pull them out, don't worry about it. It's really not a big deal. It's very simple to pull those worms out and stuff. And if you have a system or a VermiBag running perfectly, you're probably not going to have hardly any worms, but it's really easy to get things out of kilter, get them too wet or whatever, or just something strange happens and you end up with a lot of worms down on the bottom. And it happens to me all the time too. So, but this is a quick and proven, easy way to take care of those worms and pull them out of the system in probably a week and a half, you know, 2 weeks max. Within 2 weeks, I'll have 90% of these out of here. So that's it for today. So we'll see you next week. We'll take a peek at this. This is Tom from VermiBag. Till next time, ciao.